Hi, welcome back to Introduction to Lincoln Douglas. Today, we are finally starting in our 8th session, the second section of this course. So we've looked so far just at the basic rules and concepts of Lincoln Douglas. And those are the things that apply to just kind of a general, you don't have to have anything specific to apply to. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to move another step towards you writing your own case and really towards you going to your first tournament and competing there. So what we're going to start looking at now is how to analyze a resolution. Now, there are a few things that I'm going to talk about in regards to this. There are five ways to analyze a resolution, but I think first we need to ask, what do I mean by that? Aren't resolutions supposed to be sort of self-explanatory? And the answer to that question is no. A lot of debaters take the resolution at face value, and they don't question it. They just sort of go by their first impression of it. They read the resolution and they say, okay, I think here's what it's saying, and then they never question that. Sometimes that's right, but just as often, their debating could be improved if they just sat down and sort of analyzed the resolution and ask some questions about it. Most resolutions ask a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions sort of built into them. And so to analyze the resolution, what I mean by that is looking at the resolution and figuring out what questions it's asking. And I'm going to give you a 5-step procedure to analyze a resolution. So first, pick key terms. Pick key terms. Resolutions have a lot of unimportant words like is, ought, value, when. Don't worry about those. Don't define them. That's annoying. Instead, you need to figure out what the key terms in the resolution are, the really important terms. So that's easier said than done. How do you figure out what terms are important? What are the important words or phrases in the resolution? Here's a thought experiment that I've found helpful. Imagine you interviewed 50 people on a street, and you ask them to sort of off the top of their heads just give you definitions to all the words in the resolution. Most of them are going to define words like is or when the same basic way. But then sit down and sort of run this automatic experiment and then sit down and say, all right, which words or phrases is there going to be the most disagreement on in these definitions? Those are the key terms. So you pick those terms after you run those thought experiments, and you move on to the second step, which is research at least 10 definitions for each term. This is the really easy part. You take the terms, and you go into Google, and you type in the term, and then after you type in the term, you type in the term, definition, search. And you'll get definitions from all sorts of different dictionaries. Try to be a little bit diverse. Don't just take it from Merriam-Webster, and then the Collegiate Dictionary, and then the Oxford Dictionary, and then the Random House Dictionary. Try to be a little bit more diverse. Look for maybe a definition that a politician gave, or an expert, or a philosopher, something like that. Third, look at the list of definitions that you've made for each terms, and this gets a little bit difficult, and here it really comes down, it starts to turn into a judgment call, and so part of debate is improving your judgment on this. Look at these definitions and ask whether the differences in the definitions make any difference. Here's what I mean by that. If you go to Webster's dictionary and you ask him, what does national security mean? That's going to give you a particular definition. If you go to Random House Dictionary and you type in national security and you look for the definition, it's going to give you a different definition. There's going to be differences, but it doesn't mean that it actually makes any difference to the actual round. In other words, they could be just getting at the same idea in different ways. So what I mean is you have to look at the differences and say, are any of these differences, do they imply a different idea, or is it just a different way of phrasing the same idea? So figure out if the differences matter. Now, we're going to, it seems for a second, jump off this and jump into something else entirely. And we'll come back to our definitions in the list of definitions later. Those are really important, but those are going to become important a little bit later. Fourth in this procedure, completely different. Write down the assumptions the resolution makes. Now when I say this to people often sort of go, whoa, I can't do that. Because it sounds really difficult. It sounds like you sort of have to do a lot of really deep thinking and be very perceptive, but it's actually not. I'm looking for very obvious things. When I say write down the assumptions the resolution makes, you can figure out, trust me, the assumptions the resolution makes. Let's illustrate. Let's go back to our example resolution. Resolved. When in conflict, governments ought to value safety over liberty. Let's analyze this. What assumptions does it make? It makes assumptions like these. Governments exist. Whether a government values safety or liberty changes things. Safety and liberty are both things a government can value. There is a conflict between safety and liberty. See? Most of these are obvious, but that's the point. See, once you write them down, you start to realize even though they're obvious, they may not necessarily be true. And you start to be able to say, that one can be questioned. Is there really a conflict between liberty and safety? What exactly changes if a government values those things? So write down the assumptions the resolution makes. Don't be afraid to go wonderfully obvious, which takes us to the fifth part in this procedure. Question the assumptions. So some of the assumptions you can't question. Of course, governments exist. That's just a duh. But others you can question. So by question, I don't mean ask whether or not it's true, at least not necessarily. You can ask that, but you can ask other questions. See if there's support for it. Think about that. So a statement may be true, but then you have to ask, what's the support for it? Is there support for it? Now that's a different question. You could ask what it implies. You could ask what it means. When you start to ask these questions of the assumptions that you've written down, it'll give you a much deeper understanding of the resolution. You may not find a case or a main argument while you're doing this. All the cards on the table. You might not find a case. But what we will have is a really firm grasp on the resolution. You'll be able to look at the resolution and say, well, it could mean this, it could mean this, it has this question being asked, has this question being asked. Your cases, you could be this, 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 or this. If you interpret the resolution, you'll have a deep, deep understanding of the resolution that'll put you miles ahead of the competition. Whatever the result, you'll benefit from this. So for this session's homework, you guessed it, you're going to look at your league's resolution, and you're going to analyze it using the 5-step procedure that I outlined here. If you didn't catch all 5 steps, if some of them are a little bit confusing, go back and watch the session again, trying to pick up on what you may have missed. While you're looking at your league's resolution during this homework, if you find a case idea, that's great. Keep your eyes out for things that may be a case idea. If you're questioning an assumption maybe, and you notice something, you're like, that I could turn that into a whole reason why the resolution is true. Jot that down. Keep those in order. We'll come back to those a little bit later in the course. Next time, after analyzing the resolution, we're going to finally get to start constructing a case. This is a really exciting part. I think this is something that you'll benefit a lot from. So next time, we'll go ahead and start.